Started here. I want to thank everybody. Good evening. I'm David McDonald, President of the Downtown Neighborhood Association. On behalf of the Board of Directors. Thank you. I don't know if I deserve it. Thank you. On behalf of the Board of Directors, I want to thank you for attending tonight. We appreciate it. I want to recognize Alderman Leggett. Where'd you go? Any other council members I may have missed that came in? Thank you. The DNA's mission is to enhance the quality of residential life in the historic landmark district, protect Savannah's unique downtown environment, and advocate public policies which support those objectives. I know I say that every month, but I want to reinforce that that's what our mission is and what we work on completely. So I want to thank our sponsors. You saw them on the board of the screen as you were sitting down. Also want to thank the sponsor for tonight's meeting, which is Walt Waters Building and Design. And speaking to us tonight to explain them and thank them is Mr. Josh Waters and Sean McConnell.
It's fine if it's too big of a deal.
Okay.
Yeah. I didn't mean to throw the curveball. Well, thank you all for having us tonight. Waters Building and Design started in 2017, and we provide a spectrum of services from renovation to new home construction to light commercial. And we've really found over the years that the historic preservation and renovation market is where we enjoy to spend most of our time and effort, especially in the downtown Savannah area. A few of the projects of note that we worked on, in 2000 we were able to work on the Elizabeth Marotte House, and we received an award from the Georgia Trust for Historic Preservation for that renovation. We've also been in Lux Magazine for one project we did on Tatton Street, and then we also had an accolade in Savannah Magazine recently for a project we did on Jones Street, and we've had the slides of that. So, but it's fine because
I will email them
I'm
out.
not good with technology anyway,
I'll send them out.
And again, like I mentioned, we really enjoy the historic renovation projects and historic downtown Savannah, and we enjoy the challenges that it brings, not only just the renovation side, but also marrying the new products with the old technologies or old building systems, such as indoor plumbing and mechanicals and electrical. That is always a challenge, getting from point A to point B while maintaining some of the historic members, such as plaster and some of the molding work. We also enjoy the fact that it's basically a time capsule, because a lot of these projects, when we start on, you never know what you're going to find. So sometimes you open up the wall, you might find a bottle from 1880, like one project we recently uncovered, and then other times you might find a postcard from 1900, which is pretty sentimental sometimes to the client. So it's really never know what you're going to expect. Through the years, we've been able to assemble a pretty good team. Actually, Sean McConnell, one of my project managers, is here tonight. We also have another project manager, Mike Thornton, and a controller, Ken Odermatt. And I was going to let Sean introduce himself because he's more of the historic guru as well.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sean McConnell. Your guys' beautiful weather brought me down back in June from the Boston area, where from 2002 I worked in Boston, primarily in historic preservation and restoration. Also new home construction. I got the primarily some of the projects I had the fortunate ability to work for was redoing the Old North Church, Abigail Adams family home in Weymouth, Massachusetts, which we did a full restore to turn it into a more of a living museum, and several projects like that. So by circumstance, I was able to hook up with Josh, who was doing the exact kind of same work that I had been doing for many years up in Boston. So I'm really looking forward to working in the downtown Savannah area, and most of your homes are historic in nature. It's my ability with my craftsmanship of making sure that historic elements are preserved, that traditional building methods are used, but then at the same time, a lot of times we got to bring in modern structural engineering. So trying to work with the engineer and then making sure that historic preservation is maintained, something that I love doing and looking forward to doing it more in Savannah. Thank you.
Supporting us tonight for this meeting. Thank you.
Can I just add one thing?
Yes.
As it might happen, Josh is working for me in my house, and I could say he's a very open, honest, and hardworking and good listener.
Appropriate for our meeting tonight about historic preservation.
I didn't know you were gonna be here either.
There are two meetings I'd like to remind you about that was in the newsletter last night that are occurring next week. On the 25th, here at 6 p.m., I believe it's 6 p.m., is a meeting with a crime justice panel that will have our district attorney, who we all met with a few months ago and really enjoyed. I figure it's time to pay back some conversation with her next week. I plan to be here for that. And on Wednesday, the 26th, the city is hosting a meeting here at 6 p.m. as well to talk about the renaming of the squares. So those of you who are interested in the renaming of the squares, next Tuesday or Wednesday, the 26th, the city is hosting a meeting here for that to talk about. So, and then there's another meeting on May 2nd. That'll be in the newsletter next week that we just confirmed today. That is to talk about the development of the Civic Center site. So there will be further meetings in May for all residents who want to attend that to talk about what the Civic Center's plans and what the intention is there. We'll keep you informed as those start getting developed.
Good evening, everybody. Can y'all hear me? Yeah. All right. I know this mic thing is always tricky. I'm Corporal Flynn. This is Officer Blake. We're your neighborhood resource officers, as many of you already know. I'm going to go over a few things, just be quite simple. Over the weekend, 3 juveniles were arrested by the Central Precinct, but they stole a car from South Carolina. It was a Kia, 2014 Kia Optima. And I'm sure some of you are aware that that's been a trend that has been going on. It's a significant arrest because the 3 that were caught were potentially believed to be involved in some of the other ones that have been happening throughout our city. But this time they decided to take the party to South Carolina. Then they came back here, and we have a flock camera system that is essentially a tag reader. So if a vehicle that is stolen, involved in a crime or anything like that is entered into that system and it passes one of our flock cameras, it sends a message to every officer on the department that has a flock notification set up for themselves. So you can imagine how easy it was to figure out where they were once we got that information. But through a collective effort, the 3 were all caught and they were all arrested and charged in reference to that stolen vehicle. And our hope is that that arrest will help lower the number that we've been having in our neighborhood. And that leads me to my next point of reference. I've been doing some research to find out what the auto companies have been doing to curb this problem. It has been going on since the pandemic began. People got bored and they started trying to find out other ways to entertain themselves and have fun. Unfortunately, it turned into a situation where a TikTok trend led to folks finding out that you can hotwire a Kia or a Hyundai vehicle that was produced or manufactured after 2011 using a simple USB cord, just like you would charge your phone with. But what the automakers have done, they've now began to install software updates on their vehicles. A few minutes ago, I just emailed a copy of my PSA with all the exact details to Mr. McDonald and Ms. Casey Platicia. I'll make sure they get it out to everyone. But in essence, what they've done, if you own, how many of you own a Kia or a Hyundai that was made after 2011? Okay, so contact your local car dealership. They can give you more information about the update. They're rolling out the software updates for different makes, models, and trim levels as the year goes on. Some cars will be added to the list in May. In the meantime, if you can't get your update, if you purchase a steering wheel lock for your car, they'll reimburse you up to $50 if you provide them with a copy of the receipt for purchasing it. Other than that, we're still continuing to see some car break-ins throughout the neighborhood. A lot of it's unlocked cars. A lot of times We're still seeing the window smashing like I've told you all before. We don't know why or what they're looking for, because over 90% of the reports that I read, they don't take anything out of the car. So I don't know if this is just someone doing it for fun or what, but we'll arrest somebody for it, then someone else will start doing it. And I don't know if that's a trend from social media or not. I don't have any facts about that, but it just leads me to believe that there's something influencing window smashing with cars. STVRs, I know I spoke about those before too. We're not having the burglaries like we used to before. The numbers have drastically dropped. In January, I believe it was, Lieutenant McFall, I did an informational session on Zoom with about maybe 60% of the STVR owners were in this meeting that I did. And I tried to educate them on how to better secure the short-term vacation rentals. But the ones that we're seeing that are getting burglarized, it's simple stuff. Unlocked doors, they have locks that have a 30-second delay on them. So these people will walk out, somebody will walk in once they're gone, a few seconds later. They're not securing the courtyards, they're not securing the garages to the lanes, and it's allowing easy access through windows, doors, whatever. So if you or anyone knows anyone that owns STVR, just, remind them that that's an issue. And it's not always the owner, it's the visitors, or it could be the cleaning company or something like that. Those are the main points and things that we're seeing downtown. Yes.
I don't know if you have this statistic, but it's based on how many home things are in residential homes where residents live in them versus SBRT, whatever it is.
The revenue.
No, the difference, not the revenue, the difference in what percentage of these home break-ins occur where?
I got you. So the difference between STVRs and actual residents where people live, I don't have that, but I can surely produce it. I can produce it and get it to you. Yes, ma'am. I can have that produced. I can ask them. And we have an analyst that can do that for me.
Perfect.
And we also have an event that's coming up. I'll let Officer Blake fill you in on that.
Good evening, everyone. So on May 6th, we're having a community field day out at Carver Village. They're parked right across from their center. It's gonna be from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. If you guys are free, you're more than welcome to come out. It's gonna be free food, games, and stuff for the kids, but it's just an event just to engage with the community, because most times I know you guys are just used to seeing us going from call to call, and you think it's just about us handling the call, but it's more than just a call. We wanna be able to build that relationship with you guys, so that's the time for us to actually engage with you without actually working. So if you guys are free, feel free to come out and enjoy some fun with us. May 6th, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m.
We have two businesses downtown that are having their liquor license taken away.
Yes, so the Vice Lounge on Broughton Street, is that I think it's 206 West Broughton, it's 100 block of West Broughton Street. 106 West Broughton, the Vice Lounge had their liquor license pulled, and Sloppy Toppy as well. And then they're up for a council review on the 6th, or what day of May is that?
It's on the 3rd.
The 3rd?
We're gonna do a show cause hearing for both of those, businesses, but, I sent it to you, David, both of those, reports, but one of them is a double rate at the Vice Lounge. The 15-year-old and the 19-year-old was in the building, and they served them alcohol, and they was raping while they were in that building. That was at the Vice, but the Sloppy Toppy, if you're not familiar with that business, the young lady was operating, and she was under federal indictment. She pled guilty to I think almost 60 different charges, and she's going to jail, and that's just the culture of what we're doing now. There's a lot of businesses that have been active, and a lot of illegal activities have been going on, but moving forward, as a district, we're not going to tolerate.
Thank you.
Yes.
Weekends, an arrest was made in reference to the Vice Lounge assault. But I can't provide details because it's a special victim statement.
Sloppy Toppy, Google that. It's an insult to the neighborhood, just the name alone. It's how they a person who was under federal indictment at the time for drug trafficking, money laundering, and other crimes would even apply for a license and have it considered by the council is amazing in the city. The city manager did reject it and say no. Victoria Neighborhood Association reached out to DNA for support, and we lobbied the council as well to tell them that's ridiculous. So I'm glad to hear they got it denied. It is an insult, just that name alone, if you Google it. Do not say it in public. But tonight's presenters are Sue Adler from the Historic Savannah Foundation and Ryan Jarles, Historic Savannah Foundation, and Andrew Jones from the Oglethorpe Coalition. The topic obviously is historic preservation in downtown. Recently, there has been much discussion about historic preservation in the landmark historic district. Many of you have commented to me that they believe that HSF has retrenched and from historic preservation in the landmark district. This is what drove several residents to organize the Oglethorpe Coalition to better support historic preservation in the landmark district. So to better understand how we can maintain our historic nature, the board thought it was an excellent opportunity to hear from both of these organizations. So we'll begin tonight with Sue Adler, who's the president and CEO of HSF, and Ryan Jarles, who's the director of preservation and historic preservation for HSF. Sue is an experienced nonprofit professional who specializes in community engagement, communications, and fundraising. She has many professional accomplishments in the local community, including establishing Savannah's Susan G. Komen Race for the Cure, fighting for Savannah's tiniest citizens as executive director of the Savannah chapter of the March of Dimes. She's also on several boards throughout the city and is very active. Ryan was born just outside of Nashville in the hills of Middle Tennessee, which is where his love for history began at the age of 12 when he began volunteering at the Hermitage, home of Andrew Jackson. He moved to Savannah shortly after high school to pursue a BFA in historic preservation from SCAD. And prior to graduating, he completed 2 internships with the City of Nashville, Tennessee, the Metropolitan Historic Zoning Commission, and the Metropolitan Historical Commission, as well as an internship with AmeriCorps, American Conservation Experience. So both of them will come up and talk to us. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us speak this evening. We're happy to join you all. When David reached out to us, he asked us to specifically speak about preservation concerns in the landmark historic district. And that
Can't hear you.
No. Can you hear me now? Yeah. And that's what Ryan will start off with. Thank you.
Hello. He finished off my college career, but I've worked for the Metropolitan Planning Commission. I've worked for the National Park Service as a preservation maintenance person. And most recently I worked for the Landmark Society of Western New York in Rochester, New York as one of their preservation planners. Before,
Right in the mic.
okay, mine's not very bright. We'll just fill it in the rest of my career, but I'll move on from there. So I believe there are several things that HSF and myself would deem appropriate to be recognized as the current active and looming over the edge preservation concerns for the landmark district. One of the largest that gets brought up more often than most, and is a win-lose, I would say. It could be a win, it could also be a lose, and that would be tourism. The largest impact tourism would have on detracting the landmark district are large-scale hotels and other large-scale buildings that we've been seeing pop up all over town. At my time at the Metropolitan Planning Commission, luckily I was there after kind of the influx of hotels, so I didn't, unfortunately I guess, get to review those projects. But we see them all being built throughout the landmark district, which is historically and currently should be mostly small-scale historic buildings within the district. Large-scale construction is really possible due to one of the other preservation concerns that arises historically and more recently, which is lot recombination. We've seen a lot of talk about lot subdivision, but not a lot of talk about lot recombination. There are several projects even currently proposed downtown that are entire tithing blocks recombined to allow for these large, 7+ story buildings that we're seeing proposed downtown. So it is allowing for the utilization of that space for large buildings that we're seeing investors and developers combining and building these large construction buildings. which creates a loss of view sheds. We've seen the National Park mention pretty much any National Register district or landmark district, a big portion of those nominations are the view sheds. So any change to a skyline is included within those nominations. So we're seeing a loss of view sheds, we're seeing negative impacts on our historic skyline, the livability and walkability of the city for permanent residents, and it diminishes the space once available for those said residents to live and to live affordably. So their larger buildings are getting rid of our housing, unfortunately. So while on the topic of permanent residents, another major preservation issue is the knowledge that we all hold. So everyone in this room could agree that the knowledge we have is powerful. One of the things that the Landmark District lacks, particularly for people moving here, is the knowledge of what they can and cannot do with these properties that they're purchasing within our Landmark District. I think the best way to reference it would be as if you're purchasing a property in a gated neighborhood, like the Landings or any other of those gated communities around Savannah. You're purchasing a property with an HOA, right? Anything you do is kind of governed by that HOA. And that's essentially what our city is in a way, with our ordinances and our standards that we have for the Landmark District. We have to follow them. When we purchase a property here, we are now obligated to follow those rules and regulations. A community like ours, with our specific and strict ordinances and regulations and standards and guidelines, they're not as common as you think. Many of the historic towns and cities I've lived in, you can literally do whatever you want. So it's really up to the community at that point to kind of make the decision on whether they keep their historic integrity or not. So we luckily are in one that does have those ordinances. So when people are moving here, they just assume, so let's say you're moving here from Austin, Texas. Austin does have a lot of local landmark districts, but when they're moving here, they may not necessarily understand that they have those rules and regulations placed upon them. So when they're moving here, they just assume they can do whatever they want, just as they were previously when they lived somewhere else. So which brings me to another topic of major preservation concern for the Landmark District, which I'll combine with that previous acknowledgement of that term knowledge, and that being the influx of out-of-town, out-of-state, and more recently throughout COVID, a lot of out-of-country people moving here to our city. This influx is going to continue. We all know Hyundai is coming. It's coming to Bryan County, but that's going to very much impact Chatham County as well, and specifically the Landmark District. People will want to come here. It is undoubtedly going to create a hurricane-force wind of people coming our way to our Landmark District even. It is the largest economic impact that we're going to see in the state of Georgia ever in the history of time. So we just all have to be very much concerned about this and very much prepared for the fact that we are not, as a community, prepared for that at this point. So as I mentioned before, the people who will be coming here will most likely have no idea that there are rules and regulations placed upon them when it comes to the historic districts. All of us in this room understand those rules and regulations, and we'd love to believe that our realtors, our real estate lawyers, and the other people who are involved in the purchasing of property in the Landmark District would understand this and provide that information to these new buyers, but oftentimes that unfortunately gets lost in the mix. I get called like 20 times a day from people who are angry at me for some reason because they can't do stuff to their building. I'm not the one who created those rules and regulations, I just abide by them. So one of the things that, and this is a very small thing, here I'll open my bag, sorry. One of the things we came up with recently, it's called owning historic properties, and this is a very simple thing that we're doing, so this is just something small. And we brought several copies of it we can pass around. But these are going to be provided to all realtor offices, lawyers' offices, the Metropolitan Planning Commission, people who really need to be informing people who are within our city what their rules are and what they need to abide by. It's just kind of explains what it means to own a property in our Landmark District and everyone you need to be able to contact in order to do anything to your property in the Landmark District. Obviously.
I have one of those now.
We have a few, they're still at the printers, but we have a few that we can pass around.
We'll leave them on the podium.
So they'll be up here on the podium. You can make copies and send them out if you want. And then eventually we'll have large stacks of them to pass out to people. So one simple thing that can be done is something small like this. Obviously there are different things that need to happen in our community to move in onto those other situations like lot recombinations. Currently, there's a working group with the city the Oglethorpe Coalition, HSF, all these other groups have gotten together and have kind of created this new unprecedented thing that's never happened before. It happens a lot kind of behind closed doors with the city a lot, but this is a way that all of us have come together and we're working on figuring out how to fix the situation that's arisen with lot subdivisions. So that can be something that happens again with lot recombinations. It can be something that happens again with height differences in the community, height and mass, with these large scale buildings. And so as long as we abide by those rules and regulations set forth by the community members, that's one quick way to at least ensure the preservation of our great city. And like I said, we brought a few of these to pass around, so you can look at those when you want. We unfortunately have a million meetings that we go to, so we would love if you had any questions. I don't know if they're allowed to ask us questions right now, or if you were wanting to do both presentations.
Yeah, well, first we'll start with any questions from anyone for us.
Have you ever considered sending a welcome package with all the information when a house trades to the new owners? And not waiting for them to come to you, but to be proactive and sending a welcome package about
For realtors, we've done that.
So we have had realtor meetings where we've gathered the realtors in the community together, but this is sort of a smaller version of what that welcome package would be. But I would say it'd be kind of difficult for a small organization. We have 6 people who work in our building to keep track of every single property that's sold or purchased within the community. But we can work, we would be willing to work with realtors in any way possible to get that information.
Can I add to that? May I add that to that a little bit? So Kim Newbold, our Education and Research Associate, and myself last year met with every realtor's office. Additionally, last May, during Preservation Month, we had a seminar for realtors in Savannah. We had a wonderful turnout. And then in the past, we've actually partnered with a one-off realtor that was very interested, because realtors often leave welcome packets in new properties. And we partnered with them to have information much like this, although this is more succinct. I think this is really well done because it's sort of, anybody can understand it. So we have, yes, done various initiatives like that. I think that's sort of what you're talking about. I think.
Sort of.
Okay. But any other questions?
David mentioned a perception that the HSF has, I think you said, David, retrenched from the original mission, let's say. Could you briefly say, what is the HSF's mission now? And is it different from what it has been historically? And if so, in what way?
I think any organization over time is going to change, correct? Anyone who's owned an organization for 20 plus years, ours was founded in the 1950s, it's gonna change over time. I see Historic Savannah Foundation just as that, Historic Savannah Foundation. We're a small organization, but we have to play a part in the entirety of Savannah. So we, with our revolving fund properties, have moved into Kyler Brownville. We're trying to move into the West Savannah neighborhood. We've moved into the East Savannah neighborhood. I think a reality of a revolving fund, which doesn't have a lot of money in it, is that we can't afford to purchase properties through our revolving fund in downtown Savannah. So I think in a way, yes, Historic Savannah Foundation is less involved in that way in the landmark district, but I still attend every Historic District Board of Review meeting, every Historic Preservation Commission meeting, every Historic Site and Monument Commission meeting. I go to City Council and I represent our organization and I represent what our Architectural Review Committee has in mind and their commentary on those items. So we try and stay involved in any way we can. We're part of multiple committees and other groups that work in the downtown neighborhood. But I think the outward seeing of HSF in the Landmark District, you're not gonna see our signs downtown anymore because the purchasability of properties isn't there anymore for an organization like us, unfortunately. So we have had to move into different neighborhoods, But I see that as a good thing, because we're Historic Savannah Foundation, we're not Historic Landmark Foundation. This is just one aspect of what we do. The Landmark District is a part of the bigger whole of what we're working on. And again, like I said, we're a small organization, so it's not like we can do everything that we want to, but we try our hardest. And I know I try my hardest in the short time
Wait,
I've
I'd
been
like to
here.
add one other thing that I think is important. Thank you. I think there's another thing that you have to understand. We have stuck to our mission, because from the very beginning, we not only saved buildings, but we helped save neighborhoods. So indeed, in the last year and a half, we have moved aggressively into the Kyla Brownville neighborhood. Many of you know we've purchased the Kaya House, as well as 7 other properties there, several of which we worked with the land bank with the city of Savannah to purchase those properties. Because let's face it, there's also an affordable housing problem in our community. So HSF has tried in its way to enter a community that we feel we can help in our small way, and it doesn't change our mission. Our mission's the same. It's just another historic neighborhood. It's just another historic neighborhood. Yes, sir, thank you for your patience.
Great, thank you for that, and I do understand that you sort of expanded beyond the landmark area. I completely understand that. I guess maybe because I'm more concerned about the landmark area, have you changed your level of enforcement or your focus on the preservation of the landmark neighborhood? Because that's what I see, that's what I feel seems to be not as strong as it was in the past.
As long as I've lived in Savannah, HSF has been the same in the Landmark District in terms of, I don't understand, I mean, in terms of enforcement, we only have enforceability over our own easements, which we have 428 of, most of those being in the Landmark District. So in terms of enforceability, we do watch those properties. But in terms of enforceability, we try our best to inform our local boards that do review the projects that are within the Landmark District. We do watch every project. I specifically watch every project, and I gather with a group of small people that we call our Architectural Review Committee, so other experts in the field that we gather to review those projects. I don't see us as having changed any way in terms of that. The main big difference.
Are you listening to what people are saying? Because I think you're talking like this. Can you in one sentence give us your mission? Please.
In one sentence?
In one sentence, your mission.
Our mission is to protect and preserve the historic integrity of Savannah, Georgia. Including, so that would include the Landmark District, Kyla Brownville Streetcar, Savannah, West Savannah.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Could I go back to the point that you made? There is a project, I believe, Oglethorpe and Price. Is that what you said? It's this, looks to me like it's gonna be 7 stories high.
It is gonna be a massive building.
Yeah, I'm just curious, how did that happen? And is it a recombination, and is that a right? There's nothing that will stop these developments?
If you're speaking, if the property that I'm thinking of is the police lot, the police parking lot.
It is.
Yeah, it is.
The elevator shaft.
Yeah,
Right,
that's-
correct. That was the police lot.
Lovely townhouses that are facing it, they must be tall.
At the time that occurred, I was working with the Metropolitan Planning Commission, and I personally was very distraught by this project. Really, I can say one good thing came out of that.
They put the lane back
They're
in.
putting the lane back in.
Well, that could have been.
And the lane's gonna be,
Like a canyon.
Correct.
so how did that happen?
Oh, you can say so, sorry.
Just add one thing about the police lot. So originally, when that was designed, it was 2 stories higher than it currently is. They went in and requested a bonus floor so they could have commercials on the first street level. The DNA fought that. It was 100% footprint, no lane, nothing. It was curb to curb. It was massive. Bob Rosenwald represented the DNA at the MPC. We fought that. They went back to the city, renegotiated the purchase contract, reduced the price by $1.5 million, restored the lane. It's actually 4 separate buildings by zoning, which is ridiculous because it has a firewall between 2 of them. So it's 2 buildings that are 6 floors, but it would have been 2 floors higher had we not fought it. And sadly, it's within zoning, it's allowed.
So basically, the city has funded it, our organization has another view.
We wanted it much smaller than that, it's too massive for that area, but
Right.
it was allowable, sadly.
Thanks.
Sorry.
I think we can all agree that we want everything that's being proposed to be smaller. Moving forward.
You pretty much watch what the agendas are for the different groups that make decisions about Savannah. And I must say, I must miss the zoning that allowed the 17-story dorm to be built, and some of the things that we're talking about as well. It does all come down to zoning, doesn't it? You know, that's our law. And I just think there needs to be more information out there before things are changed that tremendously affect not just the individual property, but the precedent that it sets. So whatever we can do to make this information more open before the decisions are made, I think would be very helpful.
Maybe we can get our alderman to speak to that.
And how who makes these decisions? Because I get confused between you and the MPC and this one, and then I'm like in an alphabet
Right.
soup.
So HSF does not make any of the decisions, unfortunately. We wish we could, but we can't. To speak off of what Artis just mentioned, I think one way to go about it is exactly what we're doing currently for the lot subdivision portion of the ordinance. We are allowing for public input. We're gathering any organization that may have a stakeholder position in that, and we're all gathering. First time we gathered here, it's been on Zoom ever since. We've even brought the National Park Service in on those meetings to ensure that they're part of this talk. So I think that's the best way moving forward, is to ensure that everyone actually is involved, artists. Because currently, a lot of things happen without, like you said, without anyone even knowing that it occurred. Sometimes we don't even know that that's occurring. But luckily, in this instance for subdivisions, everyone's at least been given a chance to be involved.
But when you say we are now doing this, who do you mean by we?
So the city of Savannah, after the chair of the Historic District Board of Review kind of called for it, started looking at the lot subdivision portion of the ordinance. So for minor subdivisions, we've kind of moved it into different fingers as well. And when that was called for, Bridget Liddy with the city of Savannah decided that the best option moving forward for that would be to gather people. So we applaud the city for doing that for this. Other things they don't do that for, so this is a good thing. And I think a lot of people in this room can agree on that being a good thing, that we all get to sit at the table. And it's not moving fast, which is another good thing. Things like this need time to be mulled over, we need to actually work through it. I think a lot of people would agree that Newso, when it popped up out of nowhere. They'd actually been working on that for like an insane amount of time, like 14 years or something like that. But when it happened really fast. And so we've kind of had to be picking it apart ever since then, because we find all these things that we find wrong within it. With the lot subdivisions, lot recombinations being one of them. So I think a good answer to your question is, how do we do that? Is we just have to keep asking for these things to occur. Keep asking for everyone to be brought to the table together. And whether that be HSF asking you all to come meet us in our preservation center and we all just sit and talk about it, then we'll do it that way. But when these ordinances need to change, everyone needs to be involved, not just a secret behind the doors kind of conversation with the city.
Here's a question.
Last question, then we have to get the next group.
Just following up on the person who said it's kind of hard to understand how all this process works, and could you explain the sequence or process of influence between Historic Savannah and the MPC? Because you've mentioned you're on both at different times, and so what is the process?
Right. So let's say you own a property and you're going to add an addition to the rear. So you're going to need to first apply for a certificate of appropriateness through the Metropolitan Planning Commission. So a lot of people do call us first because they think we're the ones that they need to reach out to, but we have no authority. So you need to reach out.
I was told that you all do advise the MPC.
We do, but only after the point.
That's the part I want to know about.
Right.
I'm not buying property downtown.
Right. So let's say, again, you're applying for a COA. That then gets put on the agenda. We, just like any other member of the public, that's when we see that. They don't contact us and say, we've received this application, can you review it for us? we, just as any other member of the public, see it on that agenda just like you do. So we have, literally the Monday before a meeting is when we assemble our ARC committee and we're able to sit down and hash out all of those projects. So just like any member of the public, we get the same amount of time as you to look at it, and then we arrive at the meeting. And that's the first time that they usually hear us ever speaking about those projects. Because just like you, we go to the meetings. We're not allowed to sit, one-on-one and advise them. We're not like an advisory council. So we, just like any other member of the public, go to the MPC and we speak at those meetings. So when I get up and speak at the MPC meetings that a lot of you have gone to, that's the first time they're ever hearing that.
That's the only time you give any recommendation?
And then if it's an easement property that we have, they're required to come to us because we have an easement on the property. So legally they ask us about it. But we don't, we're not just like sitting in their office with them.
Too much for me, but.
Thank you, Ryan.
You can call me if you want.
Thank you, Ryan.
Oh, sorry.
We go in there, and if we see a request for a zoning ordinance or a variance, and it doesn't fit the historic preservation, we will testify against it. Same thing HSF does. I'm assuming, and they left quickly, that they have the same thing that we do. If a developer has something that they want to get through, they contact us and meet with us before it goes to MPC to say, what is DNA's position on this? Because DNA has a representative at every MPC meeting. In the past, it's been Rob Rosenwald and Ellen Harris, who just resigned recently, and she's been replaced by Steve Edwards. Steve, you're aware. Back there. He's our representative at MPC now and lives in the landmark district. We're always looking at the agendas and we're always going there. And the developers do reach out to us, and I'm assuming they reach out to them. And I know the Victorian neighborhood was very upset with them about their easement they gave away for the Mansion Hotel on Drayton Street where they built that addition. So, one other clarification of what Ryan said before I get to the next one. The stakeholder committee was established by the MPC early last year as a result of 336 Barnard Street and the way it was subdivided. Currently, and before then, a subdividing of a lot was done at the staff level. No citizen input, no management input. You just go in and say, hey, I want this divided, and they did it. Ridiculous. We fought that and went against it. The MPC, because of the uproar created by us and the Oglethorpe Coalition at the time, when they got created, they did this stakeholder committee of Oglethorpe Coalition, DNA, MPC, and HSF, and Beehive Foundation. We all got together, sent them a letter in September, the city manager with specific recommendations on how to do things, and the city manager responded back saying, we will have ordinance approved November 21st to forbid these subdivisions. In December, I wrote a letter asking what happened, and they forgot. So that's what he's saying is methodical. The city takes forever to do anything. So we're meeting with them, we're getting close. The DNA is currently writing the ordinance. Hopefully they met with Ryan last week, writing the ordinance to forbid subdivisions in the future. And Andrew, you'll see that once we get the draft done for the next meeting. But we're meeting monthly based upon the fact they were supposed to start that in November, but the city didn't. And we're staying on them. You gotta stay on these people or they just go crazy.
I'm a proud member of the DNA. This is a great group, and I think we can get things done here. I'm the chairman of the Oglethorpe Plan Coalition, and I'm here with our directors. So just quickly, I'd like to introduce True Helms, right over here. She is a native Savannah. She's a graduate of NYU's Institute of Fine Arts and Conservation of Art and Art History, and a lifetime member and former member of the Executive Committee of the Society of Architectural Historians of Great Britain. I'd also like to introduce Jim Hunsrucker over in the middle in the back. And Jim has a Bachelor and Master's of Accountancy from Southern University and a BFA from SCAD's Historic Preservation Program. And he also serves now as president of the Forsyth Park Community Alliance. So the Oglethorpe Plan Coalition is a new group. We are a 501c3, And we are dedicated to preserving the Savannah Downtown National Historic Landmark District and its unique Oglethorpe plan. There's our website. You can contact us at that Gmail address. We have a sign-in sheet. Sabrina Nagel over there has a sign-in sheet. We'd love for you to sign in, and we'd be happy to put you on an email list. And you can reach us through Facebook, and we have an active GoFundMe account to raise money for our activities. So who are we? Well, our mission statement, as I mentioned, is that we are dedicated to preserving the Savannah Downtown National Historic Landmark District. We're clear about what our mission statement is. We are a preservation group. We are about preservation. Contributions, of course, are tax deductible, and we are focused on the downtown, your neighborhood. We're here for you, and we're the only preservation group exclusively dedicated to the downtown. You heard HSF mention how thinly spread they are. They cover 13 historic districts. If you give them $1, that goes a little bit to the Isle of Hope and Ardsley Park and Gordonston and Vernonburg, and it's great that we have all of these historic districts. But if you want to help your neighborhood, we are the group that are here to help you. We are resident volunteers. The volunteers supporting this group are primarily downtown residents like you. We have some supporters who are not necessarily downtown residents, but their heart is downtown, and we certainly welcome all of them, but most of us live here. So we're volunteers. Our directors are not beholden to any real estate interests or any tourism interests. We coordinate closely with the DNA, with David McDonald and Steve Edwards, and we want to effectively be an extension to do the things that the DNA doesn't have the resources necessarily to do, but we will coordinate very closely. We include property owners whose investments are threatened by what's going on in the district, and residents whose quality of life is diminishing. And every dollar of your contribution to us benefits the downtown, your neighborhood. What do? We do advocacy, actual advocacy. We protect the district and oppose inappropriate development, and we support residents with actual appeals and litigation. We've been to the Zoning Board of Appeals on several matters, including one victory, and we are now taking a major case up. And we will do what we can to support you. We're engaged in outreach, such as tonight. We will work with community groups and city officials to solve important preservation issues, including participation on that committee that David discussed. We're involved in education to increase public awareness of the importance of the district and the challenges that we face. And in a future state, we plan to provide the public with assistance to understand the Certificate of Appropriateness application process and the requirements under the ordinance. So I know one of you asked the question about, what do we do with owners? We're planning to provide a way to educate owners. It's a very complex process, and the system is kind of against you, especially if you are an individual property owner. The laws are not applied equally. So you will not receive the same treatment as a large-scale developer, I can guarantee you that. So why now? Well, there's an urgent need for a preservation group focused exclusively on the downtown. I think you just heard that very clearly. And as I mentioned, the ordinances are not being enforced equally. The system is broken. There's a lot of inappropriate new development as a result, and these are threats to our status as a National Historic Landmark, both physical and ideological, as I'll explain later on. I'll go through some examples of the physical threats. Demolition by neglect. So this is 9 Lincoln Street, which was purchased by a variety of entities. Ultimately, basically, it was a hotel developer who bought this and Aids on Lincoln and the entire FBI complex. They tried to have these buildings moved. They weren't able to do so. So they just let it deteriorate. So we actually have one of the worst events that's ever happened in the downtown district since the designation. We have the destruction of a contributing building. I mean, that's just unheard of. So the people who are in charge of the system, and we can discuss that in more detail, are responsible for this. Overbuilding and tithing blocks. Tithing blocks are the blocks to the north and south of squares. And the National Park Service warned the city of Savannah not to allow the tithing blocks to be developed the full way through. This is a proposal for 301 West York Street, and you see on the right-hand side, there's the street, the little person there, and on the far left is the lane. And typically a building fronts the street, and you have a courtyard and a carriage house and so on. They wanted to build, yes, they wanted to build solidly through to the lane in violation of the National Park Service recommendations in 2018. We opposed this on a number of grounds, and one aspect was a law that prohibited those entryways on the side of the building. As a result, this proposal has largely been withdrawn. So it's a small victory for us. This is what we need to do. We can't be complacent. And we had to go up to the Zoning Board of Appeals to have part of that rectified. David mentioned the subdivision of lots. Look at the map on the right. That's a map that the city prepared. I'm not exactly sure who they prepared it for, but it shows you all the tithing lots that are eligible for subdivision. And this used to be a behind the doors process. Well, what happens when you subdivide a tithing lot between the rear parcel and the front parcel? Well, that parcel in the back is no longer an accessory structure under all of the regulations that govern lane buildings. It becomes a principal building, just like a building on the front of the lot. And so suddenly the building height requirements start to apply to the, I'll actually move, just do that. And so the height map starts to apply. So what's going to happen is that the lanes are going to be developed to 4- and 5-story buildings. And then the front building loses access to the lane. Well, what does that mean? That means in 20 years, when you walk down Jones Street, all the fronts of the buildings will be severed from the back. And you'll have garbage cans and dumpsters lining Jones Street up and down. Well, there was a particular building that brought this to the National Park Service attention. They issued a letter saying that this was a negative for the National Historic Landmark District, and fortunately the city did respond, and there is a working group, and hopefully we will make some strides. But this would not have happened without activism. Here's the height map. How many of you are aware of how high buildings can go? Now 4 doesn't mean 4. 4 means 4 and a bonus story and a penthouse. So 4 is 6 and 5 is 7. And look at this. I mean, are there any buildings on Oglethorpe that are 5 stories? Any historical buildings? How did that happen? But that also means that the building in the lane theoretically can go up to 5 stories. And we have in the city many what we call conforming but non-contributing buildings, and they are at risk. And you take this for granted. Here's a perfect example, 200 West Jones Street. Beautiful building, done in the Greek Revival style. It's conforming because it follows all the rules of the ordinance. It does everything the right way. But it's a non-contributing building. So a developer could, that means a non-contributing building means it's not protected. That means a developer can buy that building and demolish it.
What year was it built?
I don't know the exact year, somebody might, but it was after the designation, I think probably in the last 20 years, but I'm not sure. 1970s, that early? Okay, but you can see it follows all the rules, but it's vulnerable. And now they don't enforce the rules. And so you have no idea what's gonna go up in its place. So many of you might have in your lanes, carriage houses or garage buildings that look really nice, they're charming, and you assume that's a permanent part of your neighborhood. If those buildings are not contributing buildings, they can be torn down and somebody can build a mansion there. Look at the map on the right. Look at all the yellow. The yellow are non-contributing buildings that can be demolished. And if you look really closely, and I'm sorry I don't blow this up, there are tons of little buildings all around you. I'm sure every one of you lives in a building that's surrounded by these sites that can be developed into McMansions. And there used to be protections against this. They're in the ordinance. We have an ordinance that's beautifully drafted. The ordinance does not need to be rewritten, but it's not enforced. So one of the main tests for new construction is visual compatibility. Well, here's an example of how it's being applied now. On the left, that's Oglethorpe and Lincoln. You can see there's a 1-story building. To the left of it are some federal buildings from 1815, 1820. 2 and 3 stories high on the right are some 1870s Italianate buildings. And this is what the review board considers compatible. That's compatible. A 5-story massive building is compatible with a 2-story federal house next door on Lincoln. Well, you want to see more absurdity. This is also visually, it's really gotten to a level of absurdity. And then the second part of the requirements are what we call the design standards. So there are details in window configuration, the height of buildings, roofs and roof decks, and so on. These are rules, absolute rules, and they're not being enforced. We find in the hearings that when we go to the hearings, we're educating the boards what the rules are. We're the ones saying that there's a requirement that something window has to be met. There's a requirement. And still, these rules are not being enforced. So roof decks are being approved on front facades where they're prohibited with no explanation. They're just being approved. Maybe not for you, but for certain special people, they get approved. So you do not know whether you're going to have a building built next door to you as a short-term vacation rental with a party deck on the roof, completely destroying your quality of life. And these are quality of life issues. You don't know if the building next door to you is going to have its sanitation cut off, and suddenly you're going to be walking down to your house past rows of garbage cans. And one purpose of the design standards is to protect you. It says so. It says that it's intended to protect the historic integrity of the contributing resources, the contributing historical buildings that are here. So our group has basic principles. We believe in the preservation and strengthening of our status as a National Historic Landmark District, which is based on the Oglethorpe Plan. And we believe in the vigilant and equitable enforcement of the City of Savannah Code of Ordinances. Now, there's another threat that we have. It's very subtle, but it's out there. There's a group of scholars who are stripping away the name Oglethorpe from the squares not laid out in his lifetime. They're renaming the historic development of Savannah as the so-called Savannah Plan. And in doing so, they're rejecting not just Oglethorpe's name, but also the fundamental building blocks of the plan. They're arguing against the street patterns and orientation of buildings set forth in the designation and ordinance, which protects the district. So this theory is not the theory of our laws, of our ordinance, but there are a group of professors who are attending hearings and confusing the boards, and this is really undermining the ordinance itself.
May I ask, what is their, do they have an agenda?
Yes. Yes, because they're advocating for developers against preservationists. I think that makes it clear what their agenda is. And this so-called Savannah Plan is a developer's dream and a preservationist's nightmare. It has no underlying constraints and allows developers to argue that any existing aberration justifies the proliferation of more aberrations. So those are the threats. Please get involved. Don't be complacent. Don't be disillusioned. It's tough. Preservation is a constant battle. You can never sit back and relax. And sometimes you can become very active for a while, and then you need to take a break, and then you become active again. Please become active, get involved, volunteer. We're here for you. We are you. We are your neighbors. Please donate. Sabrina has the sign-in sheet. Let us know if you want to be a public supporter. We'd like to be able to list names of supporters, but we understand that sometimes the matters are delicate and you might not want to be listed. Just make that clear to us. And let us know if you want to be on our email list. And again, we're focused solely on the downtown, and we're run by resident volunteers, and we actually advocate for you.
I was fighting this battle kind of alone on my block, and I gave up because I wasn't really getting anywhere, and I felt like I had no power as just one person. And one day an article came out, mentioned his name, and I found him, and all of a sudden there's a bunch of us, and I'm really happy that we've found each other. We all live downtown, as opposed to HSF and all the boards making all these decisions for us. We actually live downtown. So when you look at these boards, Historic District Board of Review, Zoning, and HSF, none of them live downtown. So it's very hard for them to understand our struggles, and we live them every day. So I really appreciate, Andrew's done a lot of work, so has Anna, so has Jim. There's a lot of us, and there's been a lot of effort put into forming this group. So we really appreciate any support. Even if you just join our mailing list, we'll keep you informed. We go to all these meetings, We jumped through hoops to all be there and talk and speak up. And I'll cut it short. I just want to say the sign-up sheet, there's, like Andrew mentioned, there's a BCC or CC. If you don't want to publicly be on these lists, that's fine. We'll keep you anonymous, no problem. I understand a lot of us know each other in the city, and sometimes we don't want to be involved. But
In ignorance about this, but can you define what you mean by downtown? Like what, when you say downtown, what is that area that it encompasses?
Our district, but that doesn't mean that we don't look beyond its borders as well. It technically is east Broad to MLK and Bay to Gaston, but we're happy to go a little higher. The downtown, that's downtown. I don't think that's the NHL.
That's the historic landmark district.
That is, NHL is Gwinnett?
Yeah.
Okay.
The north side of Gwinnett.
Okay. There are two different sets of boundaries. You know, one is the city and one is the list to get involved in terms of the Civic Center and the plans for that. Obviously, our interest is in restoring the Oglethorpe plant itself.
Terrific. Just a comment though, I've lived here 9 years now and absolutely love it. But I've watched a lot of this stuff go on and a lot of the hotels being built all around my home. And in my mind, the crux of the problem is the MPC, okay? I've been to a number of MPC meetings. Historic Savannah Foundation is there commenting, recommending. The Beehive Foundation is there commenting, recommending. Gary Arthur speaks, okay? MPC ignores it, okay? And they constantly grant exception after exception after exception. And I think there's a major conflict of interest because half the members of the MPC are developers.
Is that the system makes it very, very difficult for all of us who are of goodwill to get things done. And we work quite hard at it at HDBR. But it's not easy. The city has granted bonus stories to buildings. That was never our intention. There are forces, real estate forces in this town that make decisions beyond our ability to control. But it's not like Andrew is alone. There are people fighting for keeping Savannah what it is. It's just very hard to do, and we lose a lot of battles. But we're trying, and we are on your side. At least
Return phone call.
Why don't you put it them on the spot, what they're wanting to do with the downtown before we cast the ballot?
I agree with you. This may ultimately be a political process. We have elected officials who apparently are not accomplishing what one would expect them to for us.
Thank you, Andrew. Candidates. In September, there will be several forums that the League of Women Voters and others are putting on here at the Coastal Center, so you'll be able to send those questions in directly to those runners or candidates to see why they're not supported. We are going to do that as far as quality of life issues as well. Connie Hyde's going to really hate me because she told me to say this at the very beginning. I forgot it. May 16th is the annual picnic, so you should be getting an email about that, so please RSVP so we make sure we have sufficient